Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 55 plus driver safety program, Raging Aging Pop-Up Symposium on caregivers. Today, we have a presentation. I will get to his bio in just a second. I just want to let you know that my name is Jim Kelly. I'm program manager for the 55 plus driver safety program with the Department of Public Health Injury Prevention Program. My co-host is Lila Ralston. And would you like to introduce yourself, Lila?
I am Lila Ralston. I am the program consultant for the 55 plus driver safety program in the Injury Prevention Division of the Georgia Department of Public Health. And I've finally learned to say that all in one breath.
You should see the business cards we have. Our 55 plus driver safety program is targeted for our community of 55 plus age group who are driving. We go over all kinds of issues. We have several programs, one of which is called the Yellow Dot, which is in the case of a car crash, medical information is available to first responders in the vehicle. We also have CarFit, which is a AAA and AARP and AOTA program where you come bring your car and we see how it fits. We help you adjust mirrors. We look at, excuse me, how your equipment is set up and help people get comfortable within a car, whether it's new or their old car. We work with the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. In fact, we are a grantee of them, and all of our programs are supported by GOHS. We are also the 55 plus driver safety program task team leads for the Governor's Office of Highway Safety Strategic Highway Safety Plan task teams. Today, we are doing the presentation on caregivers, resources for caregivers. Our presenter today is David Watkins. David is an aging services coordinator specializing in caregiver services at the Georgia Division of Aging Services. He holds a Master of Arts degree in Gerontology from Georgia State University. David was a caregiver for many years for his elderly aunt with Alzheimer's disease. Inspired by his caregiver experience, he works to help older adults and their caregivers receive the services and support they need to age successfully. David, welcome, and I will turn it over to you. You can share your screen. And again, folks, I've allowed everyone to be able to talk. You can ask questions in the verbally, or you can ask them through the chat. We'll be monitoring it. David, over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Lila. And also thanks to Liz Head, who coordinated, facilitated getting me with DPH to do this presentation. Again, my name is David Watkins. I work at, we're supposed to say Georgia Department of Human Services, Division of Aging Services in one breath. And I'm a caregiver specialist there. So today we are going to go over some issues about caregivers and some of what the Division of Aging has that can help caregivers. We Stronger Families for a Stronger Georgia. And I really like to use this quote from Rosalyn Carter. There's a Rosalyn Carter Institute for Caregivers down in Americus, Georgia. And her quote goes thusly: there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And that really speaks to me. There's a nice picture of me and Mrs. Carter down at one of their caregiver conferences that they hold periodically down in Americus. And part of how I got into the field is I was making a career change in my mid-40s. I decided to go back, finish school, got into grad school. I thought I was maybe going to go do some counseling type of work, but during my school time, my aunt began to lose her memory. I knew something was up. I didn't really know it was dementia at the time, but gradually it became apparent that she was losing her memory. And at one point she had a medical emergency. So she ended up with kind of a mixed Alzheimer's with some vascular dementia. She had low blood pressure and I think lost some while she was in the ICU. And so I went from her being really independent up through her 80s. She was still mowing the lawn. And then from the early mid 80s to her mid 90s, when she passed, I began doing more and more caregiving. So I went through one particular case of caregiving from before she really needed any help at all to the very end where she had a very difficult time doing anything. I'll talk a little bit about that. But recently I was caregiving for my mother who was frail, and she recently had a fall and passed back in March. So that was another one of my caregiving journeys. And currently my wife has hand surgery, so I've been helping her with things. So it just, if you haven't done it, you'll probably end up doing it, or you'll probably end up needing it, is what this quote is about. Here's some of what I'm going to go over today, kind of give a background of caregiver programs. Oh, and I want to urge anyone, go ahead and ask questions as I go through things. If they occur to you, I'm fine with questions as we go along. I do some background of caregiver programs, how they're funded, that sort of thing. Get into the main program areas. Particularly, I want y'all to know how to access caregiver services through the Division of Aging. We're going to talk a little bit about how we assess clients for caregiver services, get into some specific caregivers programs and services. We also have some kinship programs in some of our regions. We'll talk about that, and then do some Q&A. But like I say, we can do Q&A along the way too. So at the division, one of our main sources of support is National Family Caregiver Support Program. It's part of the Older Americans Act, Section 371, Title 3E. So everyone at the state level knows we've got these federal funds through 3E, and what we do at the division is direct those federal funds and also state level funds that come in through the legislature. Fund sources at the state level include community block grants for Alzheimer's and dementia, some home and community-based services state funds, some respite care funds. We'll talk about respite care today. We also, because of the COVID pandemic, have CARES Act funds. American Rescue Plan funds are scheduled to be targeted toward caregivers. So there is funding and support for these programs, and we at the state pass through the State Unit on Aging out to the area agencies on aging. There's 12 regions in Georgia. I'll show you a map in a moment. And then the area agencies on aging contract with home and community-based service providers in their region to actually go in and do some of the care and the programs and services for the caregivers. Those caregivers who are eligible for the target groups for that 3E and other funding, well, yeah, for Alzheimer's funding, it's caregivers of folks who have Alzheimer's or related dementia. So there's some more specific funding, but in general, those folks who are eligible are adult family members or caregivers who are over 18, and they're providing care to individuals who are 60 years of age or older. Adult family members who are over 18, providing care to an individual of any age with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia. Older relatives who are not parents age 55 and older, providing care to children under the age of 18. So that's your kinship care, like grandparents taking care of grandchildren. And we'll have a section about that today. And also some relative caregivers age 55 and older, providing care to adults between the age of 18 to 59 who have disabilities. Those are our target groups. The main types of caregiver services that we're looking at are the information about services and assistance in gaining those. And that is mainly provided by the part of the Division of Aging called the Aging and Disability Resource Connection, or ADRC. The ADRC is a single entry point for getting aging services. And that includes services for caregivers in Georgia, but it also includes all aging services is how you get into the system. And we'll definitely talk about that some today. We also have counseling, support groups, and caregiver training at our various regions. AAAs and some of the subcontractors facilitate those services. We have an array of evidence-based programs for caregivers that help alleviate caregiver burden and help the caregiver care for themselves, as well as their loved ones. I'll have a slide about that. Respite care I mentioned, and that includes a range of services that they're designed to just give the caregiver a break from caregiving. So maybe a home health care aide can come into the home and give mom a bath or do some homemaker tasks, and the caregiver can leave to do whatever they need to do. We also have supplemental services. These are kind of things that aren't included in those top 4 categories, like transportation, material aid, home modifications. These are things that help caregivers that don't fit directly into those other categories. There are 2 main program areas that I deal with as caregiver services specialist. One is Caregiver Services, and the other is broken out into Kinship Care Services, which is kind of a little bit separated from the caregiver stuff. Although it's all funded through 3E and state sources. So here's that map of our 12 areas in Georgia. These are our planning and service areas. And this is where you can access services through the Aging and Disability Resource Connection. So later on, if I say, how do you get services through DAS, you'll know ADRC. And there's the number 866-552-4464, and you go to option 2 when you get the call, and they've got it set up where when you make that call, it should go to your region. You know, I don't know if cell phones work that way, but if you're calling from a particular area, it should send you to that area. And if not, you can talk to anyone at the ADRC and they'll get you to your regional provider. And I don't know how well you can see that map, but there's 12 regions there. And I work right smack in the middle of that Atlanta region, but we do policy and facilitation of services in all regions throughout the state. So when you do call, and this is ADRC's like in a separate section of DAS, but so what I did was kind of just stole a slide from my ADRC colleague, Karen Nelson, and this is what an ADRC counselor will do when you call. So if you call that number, talk to an ADRC screener, they'll basically try to find out what you need, offer a friendly approach to learning about what services are available. They'll support the individual by giving information, options. You can perhaps even talk to a dedicated options counselor and receive community option counseling in your area. And they'll refer you to providers who can help in what's relevant to your situation. This reduces the need to try calling around a multiple providers and vendors. It's kind of a one-stop shop to give you some accurate information about publicly and privately financed long-term support services and other services that you can get through the division. They can help you access things like wellness programs, chronic disease self-management, caregiver support groups, elderly legal assistance programs, assistance with energy bills and other financial benefits, combat social isolation, assistive technology. There's numerous things that you can get through the ADRC, not just necessarily for caregivers, but this is how everyone gets into services. So in terms of information referral, you would call and speak to the counselor. They have a screening called the triage risk assessment. If the caller is in a care partnership, which is what we call when there's a caregiver and then one receiving care who might need some home care services, it's a care partnership, and both ideally, if when possible, both partners have input into what the care plan should be. And that's what the ADRC counselor is there to try to coordinate that. They'll try to figure out who is the client here? Do we need in-home services for someone who might need personal care, homemaker, or is the caregiver stressed out? And there's a significant caregiver burden, and that caregiver needs relief. And what would give that caregiver some relief? And so we have different assessments for different folks. They'll triage a care receiver. Sometimes it's a DON-R, determination of need revised, which kind of measures how well the client is able to perform activities of daily living. We do nutrition and food security screening, but these are generally not for caregivers. With the caregiver, we have a particular assessment I'll talk about later. We do prioritize clients who have the greatest economic need, greatest social need, those clients who are frail or caregivers of those who are frail, and caregivers of those who might be at risk of institutionalization. So if the caregiver is at their wit's end and they're under a lot of burden here, they're going to go, I just can't do this more. We're getting mom out of the house and getting her into assisted living or a nursing home. And ideally, what we want to do is help the caregiver cope and relieve that stress and burden so they can continue caring for their loved one at home, if at all possible. That's I guess, the larger mission behind some of these programs. But we do want to prioritize those of Older Americans Act criteria who need the greatest help, and some of our wait list policy does go into that. So some of our main caregiver guidelines is we want the caregiver to be providing ongoing or periodic care for their care partners. So they should be providing care in the home, or else we're not really helping the caregiver by giving services. So we want to give them a relief from the stress and burden of caregiving. AAA and service provider staff is trained to assess that caregiver burden and understand how to properly refer out for appropriate caregiver services. The caregiver assessment that we're using now is administered either by the ADRC and the information referral process, or potentially the provider when they go out. They'll talk to the caregiver and administer the bacchus caregiving outcome scale. And the services, as I said, should provide support to and address the needs of their client in their role as family or informal caregivers. So that's really what we want to make sure the funding and the services are tailored to the caregiver. The caregiver is assessed and that those services are appropriate for that caregiver's particular situation. And so I mentioned that bacchus assessment, and let's take a look at it. I don't know if y'all can see that very well, but we actually, this was kind of in the works when I came into the position at DAS, and the gentleman who's supervising me now had corresponded with the person who created this assessment. It was Tamlin Bacchus. She's in the nursing profession, and so what had been a nurse for many years, and it originally was developed to help caregivers of patients who'd had a stroke. And then it became more generalized as it developed, and they did, peer-reviewed studies of this, and it expanded, I believe, from 10 up to 15 questions. And you can see that that basically what we're trying to determine with this assessment is, as a result of providing care, has your life changed? So we're trying to figure out, are you stressed out as a caregiver because you're providing care, and what domains is that changing your life? So suddenly I'm having to take care of my aunt, and I'm spending a great deal of time over at her house. I'm doing medication management. I'm having to get some other help to do personal care tasks for her. I'm having to help clean up the house because she's forgetting. I can't let her cook. All of these things that I went through, and so what's happening with the caregiver? And the screener will ask, so as a result of providing care, your self-esteem, would you say that's changed for the worse, changed for the best, or did not change? And then we scale it on a Likert scale. If it's changed for the worse, it would be a negative number, -1, -2, -3. We kind of go down this list: self-esteem, physical health, time for family activities, spending time caregiving. Am I not getting home to my family because I'm having to go by there after work and make sure she's okay? It's very difficult. Or people who are living in home as caregivers. So, some folks really require 24-hour care, and it's very difficult for the caregiver that they have to be there the whole time. So we are using this assessment to try to get, what we want to use it for is to try to get a feel of what is it that's causing the stress, and we can use it to open a conversation with the caregiver to try to determine what of our programs and services would be helpful. You can see, and there's a general question at the bottom. In general, how has your life changed? That kind of helps with determine the validity of their answers above. It should kind of line up statistically. And there are also some blanks at the end where the caregiver can fill in and say, well, really what's bothering me is, I don't have time to do any of my creative pursuits. I used to get to go do my hobby, and I no longer can do that because I'm so busy caregiving. I think I'm going to explode. They can say whatever they need to say, and that can be very helpful for the screener to get an idea. So this is the assessment that we're using for caregivers. And so what that assessment's trying to determine is, what is the actual impact of caregiving? Is it on the physical health, body and wellness? You can see that physical health is one of those domains, level of energy, where's it, my physical functioning, general health. So that can be kind of a physical health thing. Emotional health, mental and coping. caregiving can certainly take a toll on mental health and coping. And some of these programs I'm going to talk about in a bit are designed to help the caregiver help themselves, work on some self-efficacy, and give them tools to do those caregiving tasks in a better manner, where they're not suffering as much mental stress and coping difficulty. And then quality of life issues like the hobby thing I talked about, or your social relationships, you're having to split time between caregiving and other family, and financial burden. If you have a lack of means, I'll tell you one thing I found out was incontinence supplies are very expensive, and I shopped for them and I would carry them in, and I learned not to have any embarrassment or anything about carrying a million Depends up a stairwell. It's just how you do it. It's just what you have to do, and it can affect your coping skills. You have to learn those skills as a caregiver. So all of those domains, they're interrelated. Changes to one can affect the other. If you're too mentally stressed out, that can take a physical toll. If you're not taking care of your physical health, you can get really ragged out if you're not sleeping. And I know I definitely lost some sleep for caregiving, second guessing some of my decisions. You're going to lose sleep and you're going to get stressed out. And that's what we're trying to provide some help for folks, so they are more well prepared to continue doing that and do what they can for their loved one. So what is the kind of things that caregivers need? Like I mentioned, some time for family, friends, help with caregiving chores is one of the biggies. Some of the things I certainly could not do personal care for my aunt, and that was just going to be something I didn't do. I could do the financial stuff, the buying stuff, the scheduling things, some of the transportation issues and things, but I could not do personal care, and I hired that out. Someone to listen to them. Caregivers can be really stressed out, and I had a call with someone at the insurance company that was great, because she gave me so much information and really helped. And that's what we want some of our counselors and service providers can just be there to listen. And we have some programs that are also designed to incorporate listening and encouragement for the caregiver. Sometimes you just need a little bit like, hey, sounds to me like you're doing everything you can do in the situation. Information and training is good, helping to figure out what is really going on here. We had periods where, what's causing this confusion? Is she really losing more memory? She's very upset, or is it a UTI? Sometimes can be a cause of confusion. How to navigate the system and services is a really big deal, and we really want to help you do that. Strategies for some of the caregiving challenges, which we have various programs for, some problem-solving techniques, and there's always stress management for caregivers, because it can be super stressful. I mentioned respite care as one of the main program areas that 3E is about, and what respite care services is to offer a temporary substitute support or potentially living arrangements for care recipients in order that the caregiver can get a brief period of rest or a break, be able to get out of the house, do what they need to do as caregivers, go to the gym, go see other family in the area, whatever they need to do, give them just a brief respite, time of respite where they get a break. And some of the tasks that can provide the respite for the caregivers include you could have a home healthcare aide come in and provide assistance with activities of daily living. And the ADLs are things like self-feeding, functional mobility, so transferring, getting out of bed, getting into a wheelchair, getting from one room to another, continence, dressing, bathing, and toileting. So those main kind of activities of daily living that are all necessary to live as a human being. So we might, give mom a bath or be able to help do some of those things that I, as a caregiver, am unable to do, and that'll help me get out of the house, go do some of the running around, errands, whatever I need to do at that time. It can also be tasks that provide assistance with instrumental activities of daily living. These are more of some of the things that require levels of cognitive functioning, cleaning house, doing the laundry, some of the money management, preparing meals, using communication devices, telephones, television, things like that, or using transportation, that they can come in and help with that. Housekeeping is one of the homemaker services is one of the things that many of the home healthcare services go into the house and do. And that's also one less thing that the caregiver needs to do if they can go in and do some light housekeeping. We also have adult daycare and adult day health programs. So say my loved one has Alzheimer's, there's a adult daycare program who accepts dementia clients, and I'll give her a ride to the adult day, drop her off in the morning. They'll give a meal, provide activities, and I can run and go do what I need to do as a caregiver, go back to the house and just have a little alone time. Whatever I need to do gives me a respite while my loved one is at adult daycare. There's also services, skilled care, such as medication management and medical care. Some companionship and supervision activities are potentially available. And the one other service is short-term or extended lodging at residential facilities. If I want to go on vacation, I'm a caregiver, we might have her taken care of for a week at a nursing home or assisted living, where she can get 24/7 care, and I can go on my vacation, come back, bring her back home. So that's one of the services is respite care. Here's a few other services that are covered. I've mentioned some of these throughout. One of the big ones during COVID, a lot of times the caregivers doing meals at home, but during COVID, we're talking older adults and some at-risk clients with chronic conditions just didn't want to get out of the house. It's ongoing, taking some precautions. So home delivered meals became a big thing with some of those CARE Act funds, where we would get home delivered meals to caregivers. Material aid also went up during this time because some of the respite care, they were not wanting to have the home health care aide come into the homes because they're in a lot of other homes as well. And so to prevent any transmission of COVID, we were doing more material aid and trying to help send things directly that could be supportive for caregivers. Also have some caregiver support groups, caregiver training, support for specific chronic conditions. Now, some of these programs are evidence-based, evidence-informed programs for caregivers. And I mentioned that caregivers need to have someone to listen to them and get some encouragement. One of our programs that we tried to implement statewide, it's no longer statewide because it just didn't catch on in some regions, but Benjamin Rose Institute Care Consultation is a telephone coaching program. They have their their own database and system that leads the care consultants through a series of screening questions and leads to action steps that they do with their care partnerships and caregivers who are their clients. It's a really great program. It's evidence-based. It's been shown to make a difference in clients who are receiving it. And we've got that going on in several of our regions currently. Powerful Tools for Caregivers is something that's offered. It's a 6-week course that is done in some groups of, I think like 6 to 15 usually is in a group. So part of that strength there is caregivers get together and can share their caregiving burden and stress and receive some training and tools for caregiver efficacy. And there will be a couple class leaders who lead them through the workshop. It's kind of a workshop environment for Powerful Tools. And during the COVID epidemic, they did go to some doing that virtually through mostly Zoom meetings, but other virtual, Teams and GoToMeeting, that sort of thing. Powerful Tools is given in some regions of Georgia. Not all regions. These are kind of region dependent where you're located as to whether you're getting them. Another program, I know I mentioned the Rosalyn Carter Institute for Caregivers. They have a program called Dealing with Dementia. And this is where they have a wonderful, large book that's all about helping the caregiver caregive for a loved one with dementia. And it's got big print and it's nice and well crafted. And part of the training and DWD courses is to lead the caregiver kind of through this instruction book where when the issue comes up, you'll kind of know where to look. And I wish I'd had some of this training. I kind of learned part of what we're trying to do is train caregivers so you don't make all your decisions in a crisis. Now, people invariably are going to make caregiving decisions in a crisis. That's kind of what I did. Suddenly my aunt was in the ICU, and she was in rehab. Then they let her go out of rehab and I didn't know what to do. She had to go back home and I'm like, I don't think I can do it with her at home anymore. And eventually got her to an assisted living. I wish I'd had some training on the dementia thing, because once she was in assisted living and started to lose the memory more, I'd heard of sundowning in some of my gerontology work, but suddenly I would get phone calls from my aunt about between 6 and 8 in the evening. Usually I'd get one. David, I've got to get home to mother. You've got to come pick me up and take me home and get me home to mother. And I'm like, well, Del, I think you're just confused right now and everything's fine. I would try to roll with it. They tell you, just roll with what's going on. Don't argue. Don't say anything. I'd be like, well, I'll come see you and next time and we'll talk about that. Okay. She would be kind of talk her down a little bit. She's like, okay, bye. And I'd be okay, bye. We'd hang up. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, I would get a call. David, can you please come over here? It's very important. I've got to get home to see mother. I'd be like, very patiently explaining, everything's really okay. I think you might just have forgotten how things are. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And I would get sometimes 4 or 5. I think I even have more calls one night where she's a little panicked, and then I try to calm her down. And at one point, I didn't handle it well. And I think I said, I think you're just forgetting and you might not understand, but, mom's not around anymore. And she said directly, David, you seem to be implying that mother is dead. And I was caught, you know, because usually I didn't go that far. And I'm like, well, I'm really sorry. I do have to tell you that she did pass, and I'm very sorry, but you're just having a hard time remembering now. It's really okay, you know, and I'll be there. I went to see her, I think, the next day, and see, she couldn't remember from one moment to the next. She's calling me 5 minutes later, and I needed to learn how to deal with that as a caregiver. And I did pretty well, but sometimes I didn't. And you just have to learn to roll and not beat yourself up if you're under stress as a caregiver. Part of learning to caregive is developing those tools where you don't lose it, you know. The other story, and part of, because you guys are a safe driver program, I thought this was funny. I took her to the doctor when I knew it was like, she's forgetful and she's not as sharp and she really doesn't need to be driving, and I'm going to take care of, and there's no reason for her to drive. So we went to the doctor. I said, doctor, do you think she should drive? No, I don't. And she liked hearing it from the doctor because she'd known that doctor for a while. So she had a trust, like, doctor is saying, don't drive. So Dale, I don't want you driving anymore. Okay. Took her car keys away. Now that's a big one, because car keys are that kind of symbol of independence for the older adult. So having those car keys taken away, not a good thing. And not only did I take away the car keys, because I thought she might have another key somewhere, I went out, got into the hood, pulled the coil wire out of whatever the carburetor thing is, because I knew it wouldn't start. I made sure it wouldn't start. So I pulled the coil wire, and then I knew she wasn't going to be driving that car out of the garage, where she'd already hit the garage door a few times. I saw that when I finally picked up on what was happening. Even after she was in the assisted living for a couple years, I came across in one of her drawers, when I was in there looking for something, I don't know why, but I was looking in her drawer, found a car key. 2 years later, she had that car key sitting right on top, like, just in case I needed to go out and leave. And I was like, look, you still have another car key. Very resourceful. She was very resourceful. Anyway, I wish I'd known about these things. Some of these evidence-based programs can help caregivers be prepared for when that time comes along. Some of our other programs, tailored caregiver assessment and referral, T-Care, we used to have more of that. I think it's down to one region, and I think they may not even be doing it anymore. Rosalyn Carter Institute has a couple other programs, the REACH program, which is a coaching thing where they actually go in and hands-on with the caregiver in the home, help with Alzheimer's and dementia care receivers. And Caring for You, Caring for Me is a evidence-informed program. There are some other caregiver evidence-based programs that we don't currently have in our regions, but they are investigating. I think Liz at DPH is doing some work directly with Emory University, and Savvy Caregiver is out of the nursing program at Emory. And I think they've got a contractor and going to start expanding that through DPH. And it's an option for our DAS regional providers to give as well. And there's also the TrueAlta platform, which is kind of a video training platform aimed at caregivers. There's been some interest in Georgia about those platforms. So we do have some programs, not always available in your area, but some may be. So you can check on those if you're looking for some caregiver support. There's some webinars that we created using some grant funds with RCI back in 2017, but they're still very applicable. It's on the RCI caregiving website, and that's a link to that. I want to get into a bit of kinship care, and then we'll be done. Kinship care, we're calling it kinship care now. It used to be called grandparents raising grandchildren. That's when an older adult can be a temporary or permanent arrangement, usually a relative, but it doesn't have to be a blood relative who has a bond with the child and has taken over the care because the parents are unable or unwilling to do so for whatever reason. There's a number of reasons why a parent may not be able to care for the child. And there's kind of a continuum of care, and DFACS deals with a lot of these issues. But we also have some supportive programs for kinship caregivers. You can see that it can be an informal arrangement, deals with legal custody, guardianship, some temporary placement, or actually adoption. There's a continuum of the care there. They can use those $3 to provide that. It's an optional kind of thing. They don't have to do it. We have it in 6 of our regions currently are providing kinship care. These are our partners in kinship care. We've got 2 area agencies on aging who have their own dedicated staff person as the kinship coordinator. There's 5 AAAs that have subcontracted it out. So there's a kinship coordinator at those subcontractor organizations. We also partner with DFACS, like I said. I'll talk about that a little bit more. We've gotten a couple grants, relatives as parent program grants at DAS through the Brookdale Foundation, and they're a great national, even I think they do international work as well now. The Brookdale Foundation up in Teaneck, New Jersey, and they've given us money a couple times to do some kinship initiatives. We had some behavioral health and had a kinship summit where we got all of our coordinators, all the DFACS coordinators together in one room and did a couple days of training with one of those grants. It was really good. We've got a kinship care work team, and that's a lot of the kind of alphabet soup agencies: DAS, Child Support Services, DFACS, Legal Hotline, Department of Education, and DECAL, Early Care and Learning, Georgia State University, Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. And so we get together once quarterly and meet, try to share resources, that sort of thing. These are the types of services that our kinship care folks are offering. You can see the region we have. It's generally where there's more, where there's a city or a little more concentrated population. As you can see, we have a couple in the Atlanta area, Augusta, Gainesville, Athens, Rome, and then Three Rivers, which is just south of Atlanta. That's mainly where our kinship, and you can see we have some support groups, tutoring. Summer camps are the respite that really helps kinship caregivers, as they're taking care of the kids in school, but what they do over the summer when there's no school, they don't have to watch the kids the whole time. So some of our programs will fund those summer camps, and the kids can go to a summer camp for a couple weeks, get out of grandparents' hair. Grandparents get a little respite from caregiving there. The Augusta region was doing such great summer camps. They would have between 100, 120 kids in summer camp each year until the COVID thing hit. And then they ended up just doing a few kids of the grandparents who were working this past year. And so it's been a rough couple years for those summer camps. So, but hopefully we'll get back to some of that. Anyway, you can see where it's available in Georgia. And I always want to give a plug for the Kinship Care portal. This is actually a DFACS thing. It's an online portal, Kinship Care portal, where you can see they've got these various links over here that you can see. to find out who your kinship navigator is. It's good to, and various questions there. I won't belabor that, but you can see that Kinship Care portal for defects. Again, how do we get access? How do we access services from the Division of Aging Services? That would be through Georgia's Aging and Disability Resource Connection, the ADRC. There's the phone number, 866-552-4464, option 2. I left my review slide out. But anyway, basically we've talked about caregiver programs, how they're funded, how to get access to them, how we assess caregiver clients, a little bit about kinship programs and services. And now I'm glad to take any questions that you guys have. I talked longer than I thought I would. I provided more personal anecdotes. I think Kay might have a question.
Kay has a question. Kay, you should be able to unmute. Yep, there you are.
Oh, you're muted again.
Nope, she's good. Go ahead, Kay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Oh, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you. My question has to do with the staff of all these wonderful programs. Are you having any difficulty with finding home care providers, all the different people that are doing these services, the house cleaning, the respite care? Is there a waiting list? That's what I'm real interested in, because with all these wonderful programs, wondering how quickly someone can access any of these, and what is a person to do? Thank you.
That's a great question. And the ADRC does, and the AAAs, the Area Agencies on Aging, do keep wait lists. So part of that assessment process is designed to try to figure out which caregivers are priority, and they will screen them using that bacchus assessment and do get on it. Some areas have wait lists. Now I'll tell you, some areas have a hard time getting those services to caregivers, whether it's outreach to caregivers or whether it's a staffing issue like you mentioned, and especially this was difficult prior to COVID, maintaining support staff at some of those home health care providers. Or, sometimes staff, it's hard to keep those staff on. We are doing some work with Georgia State. Some of the gerontology folks there specialize in the issues with frontline home health workers, and trying to get some support to them, and increase training and increase their wage to make more incentive to help on those types of jobs. But I will say, you've pointed out one of the issues, that it is difficult to maintain and keep those services in place, and getting folks out, especially in rural areas of Georgia. Sometimes it requires a lot of travel, and they aren't able to make as much and provide as many hours as might be needed. So, and like I said, some of those evidence-based programs aren't available in the more rural regions, and kinship through our program, the kinship through DFACS is available in all statewide, but kinship in our programs, which are optional, are not necessarily available statewide. But you have pointed out a issue. Some regions have a wait list, some do not have a wait list for caregiver services. So it just depends where you are and what the appropriate service is and what the screener is looking at to being able to provide. And sometimes it comes down to we can't pull someone off a wait list because there's not a provider in their particular county. Like I said, sometimes it's county dependent how these services are able to get out there. So there are gaps, and we're working to fill them and provide support through. That's part of what the CARES Act tried to shore up, and part of what this American Rescue Plan funds are we're trying to get them out, get those contracts out from the AAAs to the service providers, try to shore up some of those gaps. Did that address it?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, it's tough. Thank you.
It really is tough.
It's
And
really
I feel for the folks out in the field. You know, I'm up at 2 Peachtree, or now we're not, you know, working from home or whatever. And I'm trying to support these programs, but I know it, especially in the rural areas of Georgia. That's why we're trying to do assistive technology and get some of this virtual help for caregivers out there too, that if they do have access to the internet or with the care consultations, if they just have a telephone, we can do at least some linking with resources, or at least that encouragement and self-efficacy work with the caregivers to try to help in that way.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, I talked a little longer than I thought I was. We're a little bit out of time, but I'm glad to stay. You know, we are over the 11 o'clock limit, but if anyone has questions, I'm glad to provide my my contact information. I think it's on the next slide there. And you can always get me at david.watkins@dhs.ga.gov. Always answer an email. And I can provide the PowerPoint as well. I can get with Jim, or he says he's going to get a recording of it up. So
Yes, David, we're gonna send out the deck to everyone that has registered. We also recorded this, and the recordings, once they are posted, we will send everyone again who's registered a link to those recordings.
excellent.
And I'm gonna take back the screen unless you